Hi again, and welcome to another segment of Wild Wisconsin. Now, everybody knows you need good habitat to support abundant and healthy deer, but knowing how to recognize good habitat that will supply good hunting is just as important as knowing what types of habitat to avoid, especially if you are a public land hunter. If you own land, maintaining good habitat ensures years of great hunting. Here to show us what good habitat is all about and help us learn how to maintain a healthy number of deer and actually improve your land at the same time are Dustin Bronson and Curt Rollman. Dustin is a forest analyst with the DNR and has been an avid hunter for 20 years and is in fact a learn to hunt instructor. Curt has been a serious hunter for over 15 years, and as a deer biologist with the DNR, he not only knows the habitat, but the habits of these awesome creatures. These folks know what it takes to get your property into tip-top shape for deer hunting for years to come. Check it out.
Hi, Curt.
Hey, Dustin, how's it going?
Welcome to Wild Wisconsin. I'm Dustin Bronson with the Division of Forestry.
And I'm Curt Rollman. I'm a deer biologist with a DMAP program, Deer Management Assistance Program.
Today we're going to talk about forest habitat, deer habitat, and what makes good deer habitat.
So, Dustin, well, in your opinion, what is good deer habitat?
Well, when I think of deer habitat, I think of two things. I think of food and I think of cover. Now, cover can be a wide range of species, but I really think about density of cover. So winter thermal cover, it's all about density of conifers, things that can stop wind, that help reduce snow load. But when it comes to food and browse specifically, we're thinking of very specific tree species that are highly palatable to deer. So there are a number of tree species when you go into the forest that are unpalatable deer, that don't provide any nutrition to the deer, and some species that provide a lot of nutrition are really important to deer. Species that are of importance to deer are like oak and aspen. In northern hardwoods, we'll see yellow birch, hemlock, cedar, sugar maple. Species that are of lower importance to deer are red maple, maybe jack pine, red pine, a lot of the pine species. And then we have species that are not palatable at all to deer, like spruce, buckthorn and ironwood and leatherwood, musclewood. A lot of those species provide no nutrition whatsoever to deer.
So you're telling me if I got a spot that I can see about 200 yards in the understory, that might not be the best spot to go?
If I'm looking for a place to hunt, I know a lot of guys like that open understory. But the understory is what's providing cover to the deer, it's providing food to the deer. And so some of the best places you can hunt is when it's really thick understory. I can create the shooting lanes I need, but I can't create the food and the cover. I got to go to where the food and cover exists, and I'll create the hunting situation that's best for me once I find that area. So I'm looking for very dense cover. That's why aspen stands are fantastic. Young aspen stands, fantastic. Young oak stands. Oak are highly palatable to deer. It provides great food. But it also, if you have enough stem density of oak, it can provide great cover as well. So Curt, you're with DMAP. Tell us what DMAP is.
So DMAP is the Deer Management Assistance Program, and that's a new program that's been around for 4 years with the DNR, and that program has a lot to do, work with private landowners, and it also can work with public land managers as well. But the idea is to work with these land managers to increase their deer habitat or get better ideas for their land management goals, and kind of have a responsible number of deer on the property and kind of get healthy deer, healthy habitat is the tagline of the program.
And we're hearing more and more main priorities of woodland owners now is not revenue, it's wildlife, and specifically for deer. And so folks want to manage their forest for deer, and that's great. But oftentimes people are adverse to doing the harvest, and I know that's something hard to get over. Oftentimes we hear that their property was great for hunting many years ago, maybe when Grandpa was managing it, and it's getting worse and worse through the years. And what's happening is that forest is getting older and older, and we're seeing less understory, regeneration in that understory, and so that forest might be due for a harvest.
One concern that I hear from a lot of people is, if I have the cut on my land, it's going to change the deer movements and it's going to hurt my hunting opportunity, which depending on the cut that you do, well, in most cases the cut's going to help in the long run. And if you are concerned about the short term, it's all about being mobile and reading that sign on your property. And if you have a cut in one section, then you move to the area when the deer are coming through in a different funnel or something to that extent. But in the long run, I fully agree that timber management is going to be a big boon to your property.
The sound of a processor is like a dinner bell to a deer. Forest harvest is the easiest and quickest way to improve deer habitat as long as it's sustainable. No one expects a landowner to know every species that's going on the property. That's what the professionals are for. To know a handful of species that are of importance to deer, like oak, like sugar maple, like yellow birch or hemlock or cedar, just the presence or absence alone of those species can tell you a lot. So Curt, to kind of sum it all up, what are a handful of things that landowners can do to increase the habitat on their property?
Well, the three that come to mind for me are doing that timber management and having that plan to execute and actually be out active on the land. And then two, use some of those DNR programs that are available to you. So the DMAP program that we're talking about and the MFL program, they're great opportunities to get out there and get that management plan for your property. But that management plan isn't going to do too much for you if you're actually not out on the land yourself and executing a lot of those recommendations and taking those steps to really improve that habitat and really help out on your property.
Thanks, Curt, for chatting with me. This has been fun.
Yeah, this has been great. I hope people have really learned a lot about managing their land and managing their deer.
So thank you again for watching Wild Wisconsin.
All right, these guys gave you some important things to think about and maybe look at your property with a whole new perspective, right? The Wisconsin DNR has all kinds of info and programs regarding property management. To find out more, check out this link. And be sure to listen to this Off the Record podcast and get the inside scoop on making this year the best hunt ever.